After decades of dormancy, the Great Lakes cruise industry is back and growing. In our next story, partner station TVO takes us to one unique port of call in Upper Lake Huron.
Little Current, Ontario. It's the gateway port to Manitoulin Island. The community gets its name from the currents that run through the narrow corridor that connects the North Channel and Georgian Bay in Lake Huron. Today, its waterfront is as important as ever and serves as the lifeblood of the community. During the summer months, the island of about 13,000 is a hotbed for visitors.
This is our kitchen. We call it 10 weeks of craziness.
Chris Callahan is the owner of the Anchor Inn Hotel, and it's just one of the many businesses that depend on visitors to the island.
If you didn't have the boaters here, it would be a slow tourism industry. We do rely on the boat industry.
And more recently, businesses have seen the return of an old visitor to these waters: cruise ships.
This little port of Little Current, back in the early 1900s, was a busy port for both industry and tourism. This fact, it was steamship days.
Cruise ships started returning to the island in the mid-2000s. This year, 3 ships will make a total of 29 visits to Manitoulin.
Around 2009 to 11, we were only getting 10 or 11 visits, and often from maybe one ship in those years. So we have seen an increase, but it's been gradual.
The history of cruising on the Great Lakes is long, filled with both highs and lows. The industry reached its height during the first half of the 20th century, and it was exactly what you would expect.
The ship's orchestra strikes up some lively music, playing numbers like Anchors Aweigh and Sailing. Then confetti and serpentine, supplied by the ship's social department, are thrown over the rails, creating a colorful and happy scene.
Live music, dancing, and plenty of time to relax and enjoy the views. Passenger steamships would frequent major city centers like Toronto, Detroit, and Chicago, but would also make stops in smaller cities along the shores of the Great Lakes, and it was a big deal for those communities.
There is always a crowd watching the ship come in, as its arrival is one of the major events of the week.
When we started 20 years ago, we really were reflecting on what happened at the turn of the century when there were ships on the Great Lakes. The airlines weren't as prolific, roads weren't as good, cars weren't as quick, and it was easy to take a ship from one side of the lake to the other. Some of the cruise ships will anchor in the harbor just to the right of that red spar buoy there.
Stephen Burnett is the executive director of the Great Lakes Cruising Coalition. The organization is comprised of both American and Canadian port cities and towns. Its goal is to increase passenger cruising on the Great Lakes.
Generally, the Great Lakes is the last uncruised region of the world.
Burnett's job is to sell ship owners and operators on the idea of cruising the 5 Great Lakes.
The convincing job was really education, and we had to convince the cruise ship owners as well as the ports. So we realized we went into a sales situation. We were into teaching geography, teaching potential, teaching a little bit of economic development.
A typical cruise lasts about 10 days and visits several ports on both the American and Canadian side. And they're not cheap, starting around $4,000 US and getting up to $10,000. One of the more popular routes would see passengers start in Chicago. The ship would travel up Lake Michigan over to Lake Superior, through the North Channel to Little Current and Manitoulin Island, and then south through Lake Huron and up Lake Erie with a stop in Niagara Falls, and then finishing in Lake Ontario in the ports of Toronto.
It's your retired traveler. It's people that generally have the time and the interest in traveling, often in their own backyards. That means that we have a lot of Americans traveling on these cruises. Not as many Canadians yet, that will start to grow, but we're now getting a considerable number of people from German-speaking countries, Germany, Austria, Switzerland, a lot of people coming from France, and now we're moving out to countries like Israel, Australia, and Ireland, and of course the UK.
We have not explored much of this part of the country recently. I grew up in southern Ohio. Suresh grew up in India, and we have been to Detroit years ago, Cleveland years ago, Chicago a number of times, but we have not explored the lake area, and this is a wonderful way to do it.
I was looking for a combination vacation that had a relaxation component as well as an interest component. And like a lot of people on the East Coast, I've been to many other countries. I haven't explored as much of the United States as I'd have liked to.
The Great Lakes cruising season lasts about 150 days, from May to October. The stop on Manitoulin is unique compared to the rest of the port cities. Passengers are immersed in Indigenous culture. Manitoulin is home to 6 First Nations, accounting for 40% of the entire population on the island.
Manitoulin Island is the ancestral home of the Odawa people. We are 3 nations combined live here, Ojibwe, Odawa, Potawatomi. Collectively, we identify ourselves as the Anishinaabeg.
So the dancers are aware of the break attendance.
Wikwemikon Tourism specializes in authentic Indigenous culture tourism for all visitors to the island.
Here in Canada, there's First Nations communities around every urban center, around many towns, and I imagine it's the same in the States and maybe even more. So it's always interesting to hear that they're not familiar with the Indigenous communities in their areas.
On your right, okay, you will see, as we pass this tree line, the magnificent North Channel.
So the first stop they make is at the Church of Immaculate Conception. And there they hear about the history of that particular church, Catholicism on Manitoulin, and how that church is built. It's a unique church in that it's circular, it's round.
Visitors are then taken to the Ojibwe Cultural Foundation in Chiging First Nation. They learn the cultural significance of items like sage, cedar, sweetgrass, and tobacco during a traditional smudging ceremony.
What I really like about the program is that the dance presentation lets them know that these cultural and social gatherings are open to everybody. Everyone can participate.
The tours are a way of reconciliation through education. Wikwemikon First Nation was home to one of the first residential schools on the Great Lakes.
They're very abbreviated learning and teaching sessions. So they get a little taste or an idea to give them a better appreciation of Indigenous culture and Indigenous knowledge. And hopefully that will kind of spark an interest and also spark conversations when they return home of what they learned.
The dancing, the smudging, the things like the braid. I think about our granddaughters all have long hair and they braid their hair, and this is something I hope I can remember to go home and share with them. And the circle, the young woman Becky who did the hoop dance with her explanation with the circle. These are just wonderful cultural things that we don't learn about normally unless we actually are here.
I wish more Americans would know about this particular trip and come to the Great Lakes, because all these little towns and islands have so much to offer.
At Great Lakes Now, we aim to cover the Great Lakes region and the people who live here, like you. Please follow us on social media, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and sign up for our newsletter at greatlakesnow.org.